Hi, guys. We are back today and we are talking about something that I have been thinking about a lot but hardly ever discuss. And I think that's the distinction between university education during my time. And it's been a long time. Officially, I can count myself among old people. I even have NETAs to prove it. And what I see as university education now and the kinds of constraints that I faced during my time, or what we were preoccupied with during my time, versus what the modern or current student is going to face. So tonight's live is a bit more light touch. We are just going to talk about the good old days and reminisce on the things that were happening during our time, and also reflect on what I see as some of the key issues when it comes to students today. So I think the most important thing, and this is reflected in the title that I set up for this, is that I find that passion is harder to come by when it comes to the modern students. So, one of the things that I have had a lot of discussions about on the internet streets relates to how people see academic work as torturous. So they talk about how there's misery associated with it or suffering associated with it. They even believe that the previous generation suffered and they just want to pass on this suffering to the new generation. But if I think back on my time as a student, I do not think that I suffered in the intellectual sense in the way that I would have felt like I need to avoid the intellectual labor that came with the degrees that I undertook. But yes, there was suffering in the sense that there was not enough resource to go around. And I think this is something that would be relatable to a lot of the current students as well. So the problem of having to work while you study, I think, is as old as time. It's just a question of whether the proportion of that is better or worse in the modern times. So let's talk about, what university education looked like during my time and the things that I see that are a bit different for the modern student and the sort of concerns that this raises then, or the sort of questions that it raises in terms of how we are thinking about education now. So starting with my 18-year-old self when I got my first degree, it's not that I had a specific dream or I had a specific vision for my life. I just wanted to do something after my A levels, and it so happened that I had just enough points to get into university. So I was offered a degree in applied mathematics. I had no idea what that was, and I just went ahead and I did the degree in applied mathematics. And at the time, then once I enrolled, there were issues of, okay, now you find out what it is. It's not as easy as you thought, but there were things that I found to be very interesting, and I think they remain valuable to me now. I've become a qualitative researcher since that time, but I know that one of the most important things that I took out of my mathematics degree was logic. So I learned logic to the T, and I nailed it down to the point that even as a qualitative researcher now, I am very good at spotting logical flaws in arguments, and I rarely get rejected on the basis of illogical arguments because this is something that I learned how to do, and I learned how to do it well. But I also can say that during that time, there was a general hunger for knowledge. I think we did understand, as the modern student does, that education was a ticket of sorts. This would have been our way out of poverty. It would have been our way into freedom, whatever we perceived that freedom to be, or whatever we believed that it was going to look like. And we took it seriously. But as part of that journey, then we also learned that there were things that we had to commit to, and there were things that we did and we did well and we didn't perceive them to be an issue. So sometimes I hear people talk about how torturous it was that we had to go to libraries and we had to look at books, but the reality is that actually we enjoyed the library a lot. The library was the place where you met people. We met boys, we met girls, We had excuses to be able to see that interesting person again. Maybe you say, oh, you took the one book that's available from the whole library. Can we schedule that when you return it, I am there too, so that I can take it from you, because I also really need to use it. And then maybe we enter into an agreement that we're going to share the book as long as each person is using it. So there was a social aspect that was linked to a lot of the things that we perceive as limitations now. I think socially we were really not deprived. The way that the system was set up, the lack of technology, the lack of easy access to learning resources actually meant that we had to put ourselves out there. We had to develop our social skills. We had to learn to build networks that were going to be valuable for the things that we were going to do. So in that sense, the learning wasn't really the challenge. And if anything, as I said, we all understood it as the ticket out of whatever it is that we were trying to deal with. And this is something that we embraced, and therefore we were really invested in what we had to do. I think also what was nice about that time, which gets lost right now, is that there was a lot of funding available for university education. So I'm one of the people that only was able to become an academic and commit to the academic trajectory because I was able to get multiple scholarships that allowed me to be able to pursue the degree programs that I wanted. And as a result, it was really not a problem, right? And the stakes were not as high as I see for the modern student because, one, I didn't have to pay for most of my education. There were still expenses that were down to me. I had to work extra jobs in order to be able to get that. But on the whole, the most important expenses, like at the very least, tuition was covered by a government or covered by somebody, by a university that I was studying in, and therefore this actually reduced the burden. And reducing this burden also reduced the pressure on me to be able to perform and get a good result. I could actually focus on learning to like things, and I could make the mistakes that I made that actually made me who I became. So if you look at the modern student and how university funding works, the bulk of the people have to self-fund. And if the bulk of the people have to self-fund, then it means that if I would have been in this timeline, if I will be a young person today, then I will be one of the people that would never see the doors of a university because there's no way that I would have been able to afford it. And the costs of doing a degree already are much, much higher than they were during the time that I did my own degree. So some of them are even 3 times higher than what I would have had to pay back in the early 2000s. So as a result, I think one of the things that I have a sense of grief about when I think about the modern student is that financial burden that comes with their university education. So they must make the investment upfront. They must make that investment work. And if they would fail, then it's really difficult for them to find their way. And so this becomes usually one of the main excuses when you talk to people, or when I talk to people, because those who know me will know that I'm not keen on AI because I don't think that it helps people to really reach their full intellectual potential. And then the common response that I get is that, yeah, but the stakes are high. If I would not be able to succeed, then I have lost, sometimes, depending on what kind of program they're doing and whether they're home or abroad, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars, if not $100,000+ just flushed down the drain. So the stakes being high and the temptation then to find easy ways to ensure success means that a lot of people usually will find themselves in this compromising position when it comes to integrity and doing the right thing in order for them to learn. I also think that we were more free to make mistakes. I don't know if it's really more the mindset or it was more the conditions, but failure is something that I think my generation embraced a bit more. We also embraced a bit more the embarrassment that comes with not knowing. It's not something that was frowned upon per se, or maybe we could have banter about it, something that we could laugh about. But I noticed that the younger generation is more afraid of making mistakes, and they do want to present as perfect. I think sometimes even to their own detriment, because then there is no room to grow. I really, truly still believe, and I think I still see that a lot of the learning is in making the mistakes. If you are afraid to make mistakes, then you hold yourself back, because learning is always a data point. I mean, mistakes are always a data point. That's a point of feedback where you actually learn something, and then that is going to take you far. So, this is me. I think if I think about how education was during my time some 20 odd years ago and what I see happening in the present day, it's really about what happens with the passion or the hunger for knowledge that we used to have, and how a lot of it is disrupted by, in part, the technology, but also the funding structures that are related to the education. Another dimension that I think is also very critical and has had a very huge impact is the fact that we rely more on external sources in order to be able to make potentially life-changing choices. So when I started my journey to getting a higher education and ultimately building a career, there was not much known to me, and I had to try a few things before I found what worked for me. And in that process, actually, I did take the long, winded way to where I am now. So I first did a degree in applied mathematics, and then I somehow stumbled into a job in the humanitarian sector. And then somehow I got sick of it within a couple of years. And then after that, I just decided to go back to university, and it turned out I couldn't get into a master's. So I was like, okay, we will do a second bachelor's. But, there were a lot of things that were just more incidental, and me just going through trial and error before I was able to land the right thing. And this was a long journey, because I already had to get 4 degrees before I could become an academic. And then I also get another qualification after that, that makes me professionally somebody who's trained in education. So at the end of the day, the path was long. It's not something that I regret, but I see an emphasis on efficiency. We even have young kids already, younger than 7 or 8, being enrolled into schools where they learn coding because it's going to be the skill of the future. So we get these so we get these projections about what the skill of the future is going to be. If your child is only a few years old now, by the time that they are an adult, this is what is going to pay off, and you want to get ahead of everyone else by making sure that your kid has access to these skills. And it's also coming at a direct personal cost for these children, because then they are already put on a very narrow path before they've even understood themselves, before we have even understood what they are capable of. And then it closes off a lot of options to them later in life. So we were raised on, you just do whatever, and whatever is what we did, which meant that, we could explore a lot of things. We could learn some things about our talents. So I can tell you now, I've become an academic, but I could have been a musician. I could have done something with knitting. It's something that I enjoy doing. So I did have other skills that I could have been able to actually dedicate a bit of time and effort to, and I probably would have had moderate success. But over time, as I grew older and I had to make balancing choices regarding life and work and other things that would matter to me, I ended up on this trajectory and I became an academic. But I have always had that awareness of the things that I could do, but also the things that I couldn't do, because there are things that I tried and I was absolute trash at them. One of them being accounting. I cannot do accounting. Never balance the balance sheet. It's something that I accept as a weakness. And just having that awareness has also been liberating, because then I didn't waste my time and energy on a lot of things. So I think it's become a problem in the modern era that we are relying a lot on what is coming from outside to determine what sort of path we're going to have in our lives. We could be doing things differently. and we could be spending more time just getting to know ourselves and getting to know what sort of things might work for us and trying out a few things before we land the right one. But it's become very expensive to actually take that path, and it's to the detriment of a lot of people. So if you ask a lot of modern students why they will be in university, they believe it's the only way that any employer is going to give them a chance. And it's not an unfounded fear or belief, right? Because it's one of the ways that a lot of employers now actually decide which pile of applications they're going to look at. So if you have a few people or several people applying for the same job, one of the easy ways to determine how you create a short list is to say everyone who doesn't have a degree, we're not even going to look at them. And that is also something that's a bit regrettable, because then you get people who are not necessarily preoccupied with things that they would care about or things that they would be spending hours and hours on per day, and not feel like it was a burden and not feel unhappy, but actually this is something that affects them in ways that are negative. So I think we really need to rethink, if there's a parent in the room, because I'm one now and my kid is very young, and I get still all this information coming at me. Teach your child programming skills, take your child to modeling school. This is the skills of the future. They're going to need to know enough about AI. And with all that pressure and the things that then you see their peers do, it's quite easy to fall into the trap of setting them on a narrow path. But I think it will be nice, actually, if we set our children free, in the sense that they have to understand that they are not ultimately in this world to become cogs on a wheel of the capitalist machine. So they are not ultimately born to contribute labor to some economy somewhere, but they could actually have a higher purpose. So they could determine what their purpose is. They will need a job, that's inevitable. So when they're old enough, they will find ways to survive. But it's going to be more important to give them that foundation and that space to explore things. And so if you're also young and you're thinking about what you need to do, it's quite easy to fall into the trap of what jobs are paying. The jobs that are paying are changing over time. I'm an academic at the moment. We're not making as much money as our predecessors did, right? So how much money you make from a career also changes over time. It's a demand and supply dynamic that affects all labor markets. And so that's not a good way to think about your future. But I think if you think about the types of things that you care about, the things that you can see yourself spending a lot of time on and not particularly feeling distressed, that's probably what you want to do, because it also gives you the freedom to have a bit more control over what you do with your life if it doesn't work out with a particular employer. So you don't want to be at the mercy of particular employers. You don't want to be stuck in a particular industry, or you don't want to have no option except to work for someone else, which is something that we're kind of wired to do as well when we take up university education. I remember when I did my first degree, we had a 1 year internship. We were working in a rubber manufacturing company, and the CEO of that company was, he openly admitted he was not a highly educated guy, but somehow he had found success and he was able to run a big business or a big company. And he always kept telling us one of the curses of education is that it actually makes you a slave to the idea that you have to work for someone else. So he used to mock us and say, I left school early so that I could lead a company like this, so that people like you with the education can bring the skills that allow me to flourish and to make a lot of money. He even challenged us at the time. We were very young, under 20, I think, or about 20 years old. He said, I dare you all, you educated university students, if one of you becomes an entrepreneur, get in touch, let me know. But it's highly unlikely that you're going to do this. You're always going to be chasing job security. So I'm old now and I'm still chasing job security. So I haven't actually been at that point where I had that freedom. I could think in an entrepreneurial way. I could think about the freedom that I have to make decisions and to actually benefit myself and other people. So this is where we are. And this is the thing that I thought would be nice to discuss. I have seen some people just saying hello. So, hi guys, how are you doing? Normally, I'm just here to address any questions that you might have about academic writing. And I had just started off today by reflecting on how education has changed since the time that I did my first degree, and the things that I think have killed the passion that I have associated for a long time with being a university student or acquiring a degree, and what sort of implications that is going to carry for your life. So now I'm just going to see if there are any questions related to academic writing. If you don't have any, then I'm just going to find something that I can discuss that I know tends to be a common problem. If you are, if you are, what is the thing? If you are a university student, just let me know what stage you are at in terms of university education and what you find to be most challenging, because then I might be able to help you while I'm here. Otherwise, I'm just going to be blabbering, and then it's not going to be much fun. And then I'm going to have to love you and leave you sooner rather than later. I'm just trying to think about some of the most common questions that I get when it comes to academic writing. Maybe actually I do. No, the biggest one I think that a lot of people tend to ask is, how do I get started when it comes to academic writing? So you've been given an assignment, or you are starting your dissertation, and you have just the description. You need to produce a 3,000 word essay, for example, or you need to write a dissertation of 15,000 words. But where do I start? What am I supposed to do? How do I get an idea? One of the ways that you can actually find ideas for your academic writing is usually from the class materials or the course materials that you would have covered up to that time. One of the things that educators spend time doing during lectures or as part of the tutorials, if you have those as part of your education, is to address some of the controversies that exist around a particular topic or in a particular discipline. And a lot of them will be linked to real life examples. Why do we believe that this may or may not work? Maybe there are some examples that we have seen in practice that show that it is questionable that this theory is going to be valid. So as a result, it's always good to start by looking much closer to home. Think about the topics that have been covered so far. Think about the things that you care about, because that matters as well, especially when it comes to the dissertation. You want to do something that you are going to be committed to staying on for quite a long time. So caring about that thing becomes a necessary condition for you to be able to engage in it enough to be successful at it. Then something that you can also always do is to think more in terms of the future. So what are your future ambitions? What would you like to do? I was very keen during my master's studies to pursue topics in all the modules that I covered that related to humanitarian operations, because I really wanted to do more in that space. And I wasn't sure at the time if I wanted to go back into the field or if I was going to stay in academia. But every opportunity that I had within a module to look at humanitarian logistics or humanitarian operations, that's what I did. Even in my undergrad, I ended up doing an HR degree, an HR dissertation. And within that human resources dissertation, I was looking at humanitarian logistics as a profession and the sort of human resources issues that prop up in the humanitarian sector relating to logisticians. So it's always good to, if you are thinking about what sort of topic am I going to focus on, I think the three most important areas are: one, what's already been discussed and covered and revealed to you as controversial and therefore potentially interesting areas of study for you to explore. Two, what are the things that you are passionate about yourself? Because if you care about those things, then you're more likely to invest the right amount of time in them to be able to succeed. And then three, what are your future ambitions? So are you trying to get the attention of a particular employer or a particular sector? And if you are, then you want to look at problems that allow you to be able to evidence that later on. So this is one place where I think it's quite useful for you to take some time and be reflective and have intent in terms of what you do. Sometimes I get questions like, can you please give me a topic? This is what I am doing. There is no back of topics, and a lot of things are context specific or they're discipline specific, but it takes you actually trusting that you know enough about the particular area that you study in to be able to identify the most important things and therefore be able to work on those things in order to get the best out of it. Then when it comes to now you have a topic, but then what are you going to do with it? Reading becomes important. So I always say this, a good writer is a good reader. What sort of things are you reading yourself? And from the things that you have read, what sort of patterns are you extracting in terms of how people may communicate, for example, or what sort of issues do you see that keep coming back that start to pique your attention? Because those are potentially gaps, those are potentially areas that you can explore, and you want to keep a record of what you have read and summarize those things because you never know when they're going to become valuable. And then you also start writing right away. So I have a video that I have on YouTube. It's one of my first videos where I talk about how you get started in terms of writing. Most times you already know much more than you realize or much more than you give yourself credit for. So if you would allow yourself to do what I call a brain dump, or it's not me who calls it, several people have used that term. You just want to know what your brain knows. And the only way for you to know that is to just let your brain freely dump what is in it without you interrogating it. So one of the things that I do, I run these sessions that I call writing sprints, where I allow you to, or where I invite people to cover their screens or do something that means that they can't really see the text and they're forced to write. And then you have only a one-way flow in terms of the writing. If a new idea comes up, instead of you canceling what you already wrote, you're forced to make spaces and then you just keep writing. And for me now, one of the most valuable things that I get from this approach is that all my introductions for new papers, I'm able to generate a first draft of about 700 to 900 words in exactly 25 minutes. So I combine these writing sprints with the Pomodoro technique, which is a very useful way of actually managing your productivity as well. And I can discuss that if there are people who are interested in it. So these are the things that I think it is worth you looking at. Just find that video on how to start writing because it helps you with just getting started and knowing and having access to your thoughts. And then once you have access to your thoughts, you have them on a piece of paper, you can then start interrogating them and you can start doing things with them that are going to help you. So this is one thing that I think I can help you with, and you will be able to take care of it. I am just reading Tom London. So impressive you can knit while not looking and talk at the same time. So much talent. Wow. I love knitting. My first scarf that I made, I probably was in second grade. That makes me 7 or 8 years old. It was really bad. It was for my brother, but he wore it with so much pride that I was encouraged to keep going. So now I'm making a scarf, maybe for my daughter, not maybe for my daughter, for my little one, yes. And it's gotten better. It's even at the very least. The stitches are of the right consistency, not too light, not too tight, not too loose. But I look forward to seeing what I'm going to get. Wellington, hello, welcome. Explain more about Pomodoro. So I'm not sure about the origins of Pomodoro, but the word Pomodoro actually means tomato. And I don't know if it's Italian or Spanish, but I'm not going to get myself into trouble because it's one of the languages. So Pomodoro actually means tomato. And the Pomodoro technique means that when you are trying to be productive, you work in small bursts of 25-minute sessions and then you take short breaks in between. When I was first introduced to the Pomodoro technique, I thought this is a very ridiculous way to try to be productive because at the time I was what I would call a time hoarder, right? I felt like I have to be chained to my desk for 8, 10, 12 hours straight in order to feel that I've actually had a productive day. And at the time, I wasn't very good at actually tracking or collecting the evidence of whether I was productive or not. So when I came across the Pomodoro technique, the idea that I can work in 25-minute bursts of activities and take short breaks, it felt ridiculous because I felt like, oh, 25 minutes is not enough for me to focus and get anything done. And then I take a break of 5 minutes for what when I could continue working. But anyway, the simple way to explain it is that you try to have something like, I will say, 4 to 6 Pomodoros in a day. And what you try to do in a writing session, let's say of 4 hours, is that you work for 25 minutes, you take a 5 minute break, then you work for another 25 minutes, you take a 5 minute break, you work for 25 minutes, you take a slightly longer break, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, then you work for another 25 minutes and you take a longer break, like 30 minutes or something like that. So when I first started using it, what it was good for is that I have a very short attention span. So it was hard for me to sit and start doing something. So my mind wanders off. Maybe I end up checking emails when it's not the most important task of the day, or I'm reading Yahoo articles. I hate them, but sometimes they're just a nice distraction and I find myself just scrolling through the Yahoo articles. So without that boundary, that very finite boundary that seems within reach, I could easily lose hours just doing all the things that I wasn't supposed to do. So the Pomodoro technique was a way for me to say to myself, to my mind, it's just for 25 minutes. So for 25 minutes, I don't need to be looking at my phone. I don't need to answer any calls because I can return the call within 25 minutes if it's an important one. And then I just focus on getting a task done. So you set the alarm so that you know when your 25 minutes is up. And I usually also take the time to land an idea. So if I was in the middle of a specific train of thought, I try to actually land that thought, or I try to stop that train safely before I take my 5 minute break. And then over time, I learned what I can do within those 25 minutes. So I can tell you now, what does 25 minutes of Pomodoro look like for me? In the most productive sense, I'm able to write the first draft of an introduction of a new paper. So 25 minutes looks like that for me in terms of the biggest benefit that I can get. Now, I had a problem with those 5 minute breaks because I thought, oh, it's an absolute waste of time. But one of the things that I also found to be very beneficial in terms of working for 25 minutes and then taking a short break was that it actually allows my brain in real time to process the information that has come out. So sometimes, especially if I will be mobile, if I get off my desk and I walk around the block or take the longest route to the bathroom and come back, actually I was making lips in my thinking that allowed me to go back into the workspace and actually know exactly what I'm supposed to do next. So this way, I was able to also be able to give myself like real time feedback in terms of what I was doing, and then working on that in order to improve the writing in the next Pomodoro, in the next 25-minute working session. And what the Pomodoro technique also does, especially for procrastinators like myself, I'm a master procrastinator. You can't beat me in a procrastination match, is that I realize when I'm starting to lose time in the day. So 2 Pomodoros is spread over 50 minutes, and that is 1 hour, including the 5 minute breaks. So if I spend 1 hour sort of wandering around, messing about, I realize that I've lost 2 Pomodoros. I have lost two 25-minute blocks that could have given me 2 rough drafts of an introduction for a paper. And then I'm able to reclaim some of that time back. So without breaking my productive time into these small chunks of of activity, I have no sense otherwise of knowing when I'm losing time. Then sometimes it's only at the end of the day that I realize that I could have done a lot, but I actually didn't, and it's too late. I cannot reclaim the time that I have lost. So using the Pomodoro technique also was very helpful for me in terms of being able to track when I'm starting to lose time, when I'm starting to have a wasted day. And that would force me then to focus just for those 25-minute bursts of time and then be able to get things done. I also learned as part of the Pomodoro technique and other things. So at a certain moment, I was also trying to track my actual activity, like how much time am I actually spending on academic writing in a day. So just writing, not the reading, because it's the writing that counts. So in the academic space, it's the publishing that counts. No one cares how many papers you read. It's assumed that you're going to read a lot of papers, but our currency is in the publications, it's in the written output that we're able to generate. So there was a moment where I started doing what I was calling contact tracking, because I cannot plan. I'm a hopeless planner. But I could actually try to see in a given week, in a given day, what sort of things was I doing. And I realized that typically, my productive time writing in a day is going to be 200 minutes. So this is not a lot, right? It's going to be less than just under 4 hours, I think, something like that. So in the end, it also helped me to be a bit kinder towards myself. If during a typical day, I'm just going to have 200 minutes of actual writing, and after that, my brain is not going to cooperate. I will have better luck sorting out my emails or reading that article that I was supposed to read or reviewing something for someone. It actually helped me to see that I didn't need to be as stressed about time as I ordinarily was. I didn't need to hoard time in my brain in the way that I had been hoarding time until that point. So the Pomodoro technique for me also was a way of learning more about myself and how much intellectually I would have space in order to be able to do things. And I also started doing things like rewarding myself. So if I have reached my typical Pomodoros in the day, so that will be something like 8 Pomodoros, I think, because it's 25 minutes each. So to be able to get to 200, I think it's 8. I hope my mathematics is still okay. So if that is the case, then I could reward myself once I reached my 8 Pomodoros, once I reach my 200 minutes. If I'm home, usually it's going to be a divorce court episode, and I'm probably watching Judge Lynn Tola. She's my favorite. If I'm out, maybe that's the time for me to get a coffee. I like having coffees outside of the house. Or sometimes now I also enjoy just taking a walk. It does declutter my brain, and it does help me then with whatever tasks remain for the day. So if you have productivity issues, you're a procrastinator like myself, a master procrastinator like myself, then try the Pomodoro technique. All it takes is committing to 25 minutes at a time. You can take a break after that 25 minutes is up. That break is going to be good for you because it allows your brain to process what you're working on, and you can have leaps in your thinking that are going to translate into leaps in your own writing when you come back for the next round of the Pomodoro. That would be my advice to everyone and anyone, but especially people who procrastinate a lot or cannot focus for long, because this became a saving grace for me. So thanks for that question, Wellington. I hope it was helpful. I tried knitting, but I was rubbish. Hi, Exploding Donut. I'm making a scarf. I hope it's going to be done in less than a week. So this weekend, I'm spending some time away from work, and I hope I'm gonna be knitting my way into a complete scarf. I'm making it for my young one. So, and I'm excited about it because I haven't done this in a long time. So today I just started this live to talk about passion, the things that we care about, and what is happening to the passion when it comes to our university education and the things we eventually become by way of career or the jobs that we take up. And I was reminded that I actually like knitting. So I actually got these knitters this morning, and somebody donated the wool, and here I am. And I'm excited to be doing this again because it's something that I can do anywhere and anytime, as I am doing right now in this live. We'll give it a try as you advise. Hi, how are you? Now I see a hidden mathematical genius within, but I think I know you by a different name. Donald. Donald, I think. Siame. Muribwanji. Baribwanji vana kunyumba. Nice. Thank you so much for joining this live. So I don't know if there are any other questions, but it looks like we might just be ready to close off. Or if there's any question in the past that I haven't quite had time to address. Okay, it looks like. Oh, okay. I'm just trying to think about what sort of questions I can also address. Maybe I can talk about one more thing and then I can call it a day, because I try to keep these within an hour, and I think this is where we are in general. I mean, we are just about 20 minutes away from an hour. So, anyone with any burning academic writing questions, because this is what I'm good at. This is what I like to talk about. Just hit me with a question and you will see me come to life. Maybe something that I think, like, if I would advise people doing academic writing today, let's say my top 3 bits of advice, especially in the advent of AI, would be read the classics. So I see a lot of anxiety over old references, that people usually feel like, oh, but if I cite this paper from 2010, that's so long ago, or if I cite this paper from 1960, that's so long ago, no one is going to take me seriously. But in academic writing, we actually do have what we consider to be our classics. These are sometimes the seminal works, so the first piece of work that got everyone thinking differently about a particular problem. And those are usually conceptual, but they're really very solid in terms of the thinking and the assumptions that then inform what becomes a subdiscipline or a concept that is used in a particular field. So whenever you are doing research on any topic, it's always worth trying to trace its origins and trying to find those seminal works that relate to that particular topic. And I think those seminal works now become even more important because they are not tainted by, let's say, the works that we are generating these days by AI. And therefore, they are going to also be a way for you to develop an intuition for how language works within your particular discipline and what sort of things fundamentally are considered to be very important within a discipline. So there's nothing wrong with citing old papers. In fact, I always encourage it. It's just that you have to have a good balance between the old papers or the seminal or classical papers and the new ones. Because even if I am to cite, I don't know, the oldest paper that I've cited in a recent work was somewhere from the early, I think, 1920s, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a very, very old reference, but it's actually one that has proven to be very good over time. We are able to see that what this person was proposing way back in the 1920s was actually relevant and proves even more relevant as we face more turbulence in supply chains, which is the discipline that I study. So I was able to cite that work, but then I had to also prop it up with more recent or more contemporary works to show that it is valid. What they set out in that seminal piece of work actually still holds today, and that we haven't updated knowledge much since this person actually came up with that. So in the end, this is something that I will always encourage people to do. Don't frown on old papers. In fact, they are gold, especially in this modern era. And they will teach you not just about the fundamentals of a particular topic, but they will also teach you about how we write and how language matters and how we express ourselves in academic writing. So I'm learning from linguists that academic writing is a second language, even for people who speak the native language. So I write in academic English. I'm not a native speaker of English, and I probably face similar problems as native speakers of English because we have very different rules for how we go about doing academic writing. Excuse me. So I see a question from, I will call you Donald because that's the name that's going to be shorter. How many articles are possible to be produced from a single dissertation? So this depends. If you are talking about a master's thesis, then usually the most that you're going to get out of that is going to be one paper. Some disciplines are a bit more different because they can be much more focused in terms of what they present in an academic piece of work. So maybe you could get more, but I wouldn't put it beyond one in general. Then when it comes to the PhD, this is quite different because the PhD is also already meant to be a very extensive body of work. In my particular case, my PhD dissertation was meant to be equivalent to be about 3 empirical papers. And I only since published one. I'm still trying to get the others out, but it was always understood that I was working towards 3 empirical papers. And I have 3 distinct empirical chapters that I set out in relation to that. Let me see if I can actually show you my dissertation. Just a second. So this is my PhD dissertation, and I don't know, something like 200 plus pages, maybe 250. And the way that my dissertation was set up is that I actually had an opening introductory chapter where I just set out to talk about the problem I was looking at in general terms. Then I had my first empirical chapter, my second empirical chapter, my third empirical chapter, and then I had a concluding section. But the way that it actually worked within the system where I did my PhD, which is the Netherlands, was that each of these empirical chapters was actually a standalone paper. So they already had their own introduction, self-contained literature reviews, self-contained methodology, all the way up to the discussion and conclusions. So this is a bit different from what I see done in UK universities, because now I work in the UK and it's quite common for people to go for monologues as their dissertations, but still they should be able to say these are the most important empirical works or chapters, and therefore these are the number of papers that I expect that I'm going to get out. In some disciplines, I have seen even higher numbers. So I know somebody who worked in medicine, and I don't remember what their dissertation was about, but by the time that they graduated, they had 9 published papers, and they were potentially looking at another 3 to 5 that could be published at the back of that dissertation. So it's always important to pay attention to the discipline that you're working and what the norms are around that. I also know that in some disciplines, people don't even publish articles. It's quite typical that they convert their dissertation into a book instead of going on to publish academic papers. So there is no rule, but if I were to give a rule of thumb, I would say for at least the types of disciplines that I'm in, the social sciences, we can expect that you get 3, maybe 4, if you're really lucky or really good empirical articles, or 3 research articles coming out of that single dissertation. And if it's a master's, then generally that's 1. That's all that you can actually expect to get. So if you are working on a dissertation and you are thinking about, I don't know, you want to go into academia, for example, this is always an important question. Especially with PhDs now, there's the expectation that before you even graduate, you have what they will usually call what do they call it? A market. Is it a market publication? Now I forget the terms, but there's a paper that you should be able to take to the market to show that you have the ability to publish if you would be hired as an academic. So ideally, it's already published in a journal, or it's under review and has gone through at least the first round of revision. And then after that, you have to show that you have a pipeline, and usually this pipeline is going to come from your PhD. In my case, part of my pipeline was the stuff that couldn't fit within the scope of the PhD, but it was still important. And some of it has since been published even before I could publish the actual chapters that made the cut in my PhD thesis. So there are going to be different things around that. It's always good to find out how it works within your discipline, have candid conversations with your supervisor in terms of what is going to give you your best chance, and then just try to pursue that with a lot of diligence, and then you're going to get really good results. So that will be my best advice when it comes to that in relation to papers. And then when it comes to the academic publishing process, I did a live, and I think I also have a YouTube video out where I talk about how you can publish in top journals. and I take you through my own journey. But I think the biggest lessons coming out of that is that good research takes time. So you are going to have to accept or expect that if you're aiming high, you're going to lose a lot of time. So sometimes people have to trade off that top publication for a quicker one that is going to be in a decent journal, especially if you are expected to show some kind of publication by the time you go to the market. So looking for a postdoc position or a lecturer or assistant professor position when you go on the job market. And then after that, you just have to maintain a steady pipeline. I think I also addressed this in that last live where I talk about how I have this system where I have what I call my main projects. It's going to be one or two at a time, not more. And then I have what I call my back burner projects. So these are the projects that I pick up while I'm waiting on the main ones. Maybe I just sent out a manuscript to a collaborator, or we finally submitted that manuscript to a journal, and now the waiting game begins to see if it's going to survive the reject desk or it's going to go out for review and what comes back with that. So I pick up my back burner projects while I do that. And then once the main project is out of the way, usually meaning that, I don't know, it got a painful reject and I'm just going to park it for a while, or it's been accepted in a journal, so I don't need to work on it anymore. My back burner projects are moved to the main project status. And then I go into what I call my parking lot. So these are the projects that are waiting for me to have some capacity to pay them some attention. And then I pick something up from my parking lot and then I start working on it. And part of the reason that I started this system was that I realized that I lost a lot of time in terms of research focus and writing to projects that were never really finished. So I started working on too many things at once. And at a certain moment, I was choking on all of that. And then I had to let some things go. And it was proving highly inefficient to pick things up, put them down, pick them up, put them down, because all the efficiency and momentum that is gained when I'm actually actively working on them gets lost. So sometimes I actually lose more time trying to figure out where I was with a particular paper and what I was trying to achieve. So based on that lesson, I devised the system where I have my main projects, my back burner projects, and my parking lot projects. I'm not taking anything from the parking lot until I know that I have a capacity for it. And I think I'm now reaching a time where I realize that some of my parking lot projects will have to die in the parking lot. I don't think that in the foreseeable future, I'm going to be able to have the capacity to work on them. It's sad, but that's the nature of research. Good research is slow, it takes time, and I'm just going to have to get wiser in terms of determining which are the more important projects that are worth keeping alive and trying to find capacity to work on. Hello, Global Sakamuzi. How are you doing? Good to see you. I hope you're having a good time wherever you are. So I think this is it for tonight. I don't see any more questions, so there's no reason for me to hold on to you. I'm just going to ask, outside of your main vocation, what sort of things do you like to do? So I like knitting. I started knitting, and maybe the next time you see me, this will be finished or almost finished. We will see. But what do you like to do as a way of passing time? And when I was younger, actually, I used to knit while I was binging on Netflix and movies. But now I'm usually not awake that late, so I don't have the capacity to stay up late doing those things. So it's going to be interesting how I'm going to find time to knit. Maybe I'll be doing it while I'm commuting or something. I don't know. We will see. But let me know what you like to do. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's time to love you and leave you. Thank you so much to everyone who joined. Donald, it was so good to see you. Wellington, thank you so much for that great question. And thanks to everyone who just stuck around until the end of this live. I think at some point we will just chop out the bits that are not that important, and we will let the live stay on for as long as possible on YouTube. And then, yeah, we will just learn how it works on YouTube. So I normally spend a lot of my live time on TikTok, and there I have more than 38,000 followers, and I will usually get 1,000 plus people coming in and out throughout the live. I get much more engagement there as well. So people already come with questions. I normally don't have to prepare because there's somebody who already has a question. And so that is easier for me to run. But I'm trying to also connect with the YouTube audience, and I'm trying to be helpful in real time. So whenever you have those burning questions, my hope is that we can discuss them during the live. That's the main reason that I will come live. Otherwise, you just have to consume my videos that are assuming what your needs are. And yet you can just let me know and I can be of service to you in real time. So thanks to everyone who joined, and thanks for those who crossed over from TikTok. Always good to see you. Always really appreciate it. And we will see each other next time. So maybe next week I'm on TikTok. I'm not sure. But at some point, I'm going to have a more stable schedule and I'm going to be announcing the lives a bit more in advance. And I just hope we're going to get much more engagement on YouTube as well. At the moment, it's really, really difficult, but I hope we can get there eventually and we can have some really nice discussions and you can force me to think on my feet. If you struggle with academic writing in general, do subscribe to my page. I have a ridiculous amount of videos that are based on questions that I typically get from people. And they are not just about here's how you do things, but they also explain to you the rationale for some of the choices that we make. If you're working on a dissertation, I have a whole playlist on just the dissertation, and it takes you through the different sections and other things that you have to consider as part of the writing. If you are anxious about AI, you're trying to understand what the key issues or concerns are, I have a whole playlist that just talks about AI and university education, the things that you need to know about this when you are doing your studies. I have a methods playlist with just shorts where I explain things or qualitative research. So there's a lot that you can already find on my YouTube page that's going to help you a lot. So if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. Please check out the videos. Please engage so that I get a sense of what you are interested in. I have more understanding of what people on TikTok want, but on YouTube, I'm still shooting in the dark because I hardly engage, and that's what I'm trying to change now. So thanks to everyone who's already subscribed, and thanks to everyone who stopped by tonight. Really appreciate it. I hope that you're going to have a good weekend, that you're going to pursue a passion that you had just put away for whatever reason because time didn't allow, because that is going to help you with just finding a bit more joy in the mundane. And then hopefully you have a restful weekend. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you on the internet streets somewhere. And now we get to this dreaded part where I don't know how to leave the live. And I always feel like I might be stuck in an infinite loop trying to leave the room. I'm looking at all the buttons and I don't see the one for ending the live. Let's try this one. Ah, yes. Okay, guys, so take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the internet streets somewhere.